your opinion, how much
I only have one.
how much damage does today's rioting in Egypt and the Middle East damage Obama by his inaction?
How much does what in the Mideast?
In Egypt and the Middle East.
Oh, well, we had riots in the Middle East before during the Arab Spring. Many of them had anti-American tendencies. I'm worried about the government of Egypt, not the paid thugs that are generally going out there to do demonstrations. I certainly would be worried about another hostage crisis if one of our embassies were penetrated. We all know what happened in 1979 with the Iranian hostage crisis. There will be no war in the Middle East before the election. It is in no one's interest, and no one wants to have it, and the risks are too great, and the consequences for the election would be too unpredictable. So I do not believe, except through a complete accident or a set of tragic circumstances, there will be any conflict in the Middle East before November. A lot of this is to pull the beard of Uncle Sam before the election. There are a whole bunch of people out there in the United States who want to prove that they're in charge and they can tweak us. We should not overreact to these demonstrations. We should just be grimly determined that we have a president who actually understands American interests and stands up for them after January 20th, 2013.
How do we ensure that our military will get the vote in this election?
With great difficulty. For some strange reason, the Obama administration wants everyone to vote except the military. Why would that be? Only about 30% of the ballots of our troops actually come home in most elections and are counted. Many states send out the ballots, they get lost, stolen, or strayed. You know, DHL and Federal Express offered to provide, at cost, express shipping for the ballots out and express shipping back. And the Obama administration said, no, we're not interested because we believe this monopoly should be left with the United States Postal Service. That paragon of efficiency and virtue. So the answer is, some states are doing a very good job. I think Virginia is doing a very good job with military voting. Missouri, California, not so much.
I understand Romney is going to be very cautious in this November election. Do you believe he is too cautious?
Well, I certainly believe that until Paul Ryan was named the vice presidential candidate. I will be candid, I am not the biggest fan of Mitt Romney, but I will say this in his favor, and I just mean this sincerely. Mitt Romney had an extremely successful business career. It involved a lot of risk-taking. It involved a lot of hiring of young people, giving them lots of responsibility. He built great companies up. When he went into politics, he went into a protective crouch, a fetal position on many occasions. Now, admittedly, some of that was the political climate in Massachusetts. I mean, Massachusetts is so liberal, its left hand doesn't know what its extreme left hand is doing. But on the national stage, he carried on the timidity that he had in Massachusetts a little too far, a little too much. The selection of Paul Ryan, who, and I'll be quite honest, I'm biased in favor of Paul Ryan. I think he is the closest thing I have seen in the last quarter century to Ronald Reagan's legitimate heir. And by the way, I do this not to boast and not to drop names, but I grew up in California and I was privileged to know Ronald Reagan. I actually worked with him on a show called Governor of the Students, which was a weekly press conference of high school students. I can legitimately say I appeared on television for Ronald Reagan. And I will tell you right now, I owe Ronald Reagan almost everything. Ronald Reagan sat me down one day, I was 15 and a half years old, and he taught me how to give a speech. And what you're hearing is what I learned from him. Including the long answers and bullying the moderator as a foil. I really love Jerry. I was just doing that as a joke.
Do you believe Romney backtracking on Obamacare will hurt him?
No, I don't believe he backtracked on Obamacare. I think he's been on record as having said, we're not going to wholesale throw out the pre-existing conditions. and some of the other things that are popular with 75% of the American people. I don't think that's a new statement. What is new is that even though he won't completely repudiate his version of Obamacare that he passed in Massachusetts, he certainly said, we're not going to do that nationally, and he has promised to repeal Obamacare, and I do believe him.
I know that Prop 32 is better financed this time, but I don't see it all.
I'm sorry, can you start from the beginning?
You said that Prop 32 is better financed this time, but I don't see it. All I see is the union spending millions. How exactly are we going to combat this besides word of mouth? I would think people could volunteer for the campaign.
Well, the hardest thing in politics is to reason from the anecdote of the personal experience. I haven't seen the money. Well, I have, and it's not been spent yet. It's a little early. Remember, we just went through Labor Day. Traditionally, you don't begin real political campaigns, especially if you're behind in financing, until after Labor Day. Television advertising is not the most effective advertising in all circumstances. There's direct mail, there's email, there's strategically placed billboards, there is community activism where people are encouraged to speak to friends, neighbors, and relatives. There will be ads on Prop 32. I would say wait a few weeks and see if you haven't seen it. If you haven't seen it in a few weeks, I think I can agree with you. But I think you'll see it very soon.
Why was voter ID passed in New Hampshire but not in Texas?
It was passed in Texas, but Texas comes under the jurisdiction of Section 5 of the Federal Voting Rights Act, which forces Texas to seek pre-clearance of any change in its election laws, no matter how minor, with the Department of Injustice. And it will not surprise you that Eric Holder was not interested in having Texas pass its voter ID law. New Hampshire did pass one. It was pre-cleared by the Justice Department. If you want to know the reason why, I will tell you. Not every Justice Department lawyer is a partisan liberal hack. Most are, but not all. The New Hampshire case and the Virginia case, which were voter ID laws, which were somewhat less stringent than the Texas law, went to career people in the Department of Justice who do not have a personal axe to grind, and they actually looked at the law and made a determination. You can't turn every decision of the Department of Justice into partisan hackery. You can turn most of them into partisan hackery depending on where you assign them, but you can't assign every decision to your partisan hacks, because the Justice Department, like most federal departments, is run by career civil servants. Not all career civil servants are partisan hacks. So New Hampshire was approved because it went to lawyers who believed in the rule of law, and Texas wasn't approved because it went to lawyers who, shall we say, have an ambivalent relationship with the rule of law.
How can we prevent illegal aliens from, undocumented, from using 2, 3, and even 4? The battery's going out, it looks like. Do you want to repeat that?
Yeah.
How do we prevent illegal aliens from using 2, 3, and even 4 social security numbers?
Okay, the illegal alien problem is twofold. One is, most of the duplicate social security numbers are used for work purposes. They're not used for election purposes. There is an illegal alien voting problem. I'm not saying there isn't, but it's not the most important one, because even with the lax enforcement of the Obama administration, illegal aliens tend to want to avoid contact with government authorities, especially in states like Arizona lately. So, yes, there is illegal alien voting, but it's often because they're led to do it, or coerced into doing it, or encouraged to do it by vote brokers like Nativo Lopez, the notorious race baiter from Orange County who stole the election from Bob Dornan over Loretta Sanchez in 1996. So I do believe we can combat illegal aliens voting issues. By the way, just as a sideline, It took 15 years, but Nativo Lopez finally slipped up, and last year he was convicted of voter fraud. Proving once again, justice delayed is still sweet enough. Now, the illegal alien issue. Governor Rick Scott in Florida had a very foolproof solution to this. After an NBC affiliate in Fort Myers, Florida found that in just one county, there were several hundred people who had filled out jury notification forms saying they couldn't participate because they were non-citizens, he found out that many of them had also registered to vote and even voted. Well, he thought this could be a problem. So let's get the list of non-citizens and compare it with the people on the voter registration rolls. Well, who is the best list of non-citizens? The federal government. They control our immigration. So they claimed when they tried to argue against the Arizona law. By federal law, the federal government has to share its immigration information with the states. The Justice Department under Eric Holder refused to share the list. Florida took it to court. The list was only coughed up when the Justice Department was on the verge of losing its court case. Of course, California would never ask for such a list because that would be discriminatory. But if you ever get a hold of such a list and have a Secretary of State, as you might have after 2014, who is interested in the rule of law, it would be very interesting to compare the list of people who say they can't serve on juries because they're not citizens and the list of illegal aliens and non-citizens that are in the Justice Department's files.
Is it true
I
Todd
can't hear you, I'm
Aiken
sorry.
on the ballot in his state?
I'm sorry?
Is it true that the Democrats were behind getting Todd Aiken on the ballot?
Look, there's some dirty tricks that are dirty but still legal. The Democrats decided that Todd Aiken was the most vulnerable candidate to a smear attack in the general election, and so they did run commercials calling him the most consistent conservative. They were commercials that attacked him for being too conservative, and he did win the primary narrowly. Todd Aiken has until September 25th to pull out of the race. I think there's a good chance he will if he looks at the polls, he looks at his finances. Look, I like Todd Aiken. I've met him personally. He's not what you think he is. He's an engineer. He's actually a very thoughtful man. But he messed up royally. And, politics is an unforgiving sport. He still has a chance to win that Senate seat. That's because Claire McCaskill has compiled such a horrible record, despite Todd Aiken's very sad and deplorable, and I don't even want to go into it. He may recognize reality. He told me personally, I'm a reality-based politician. I'm not going over the waterfall for the sake of enjoying the ride.
Do you think Obama's refusal to meet with Netanyahu will hurt his vote with the Jews?
Look, with the exception of Florida, the swing states, well, exception of Florida and partially Ohio, the swing states do not have a significant Jewish vote. What really matters is the Jewish donor base, and the Jewish donor base has been very ambivalent about Obama the last few weeks and years. I don't think at this point, not meeting with Netanyahu is going to be a major issue in the race. And I'm not a politician, so I actually will give you a three-word answer you will never hear from someone in Washington. I just don't know.
How can we win in places like Virginia, Ohio, and Florida?
I'm sorry?
How can we win in places like Virginia, Ohio, and Florida?
Well, those are three states with three different histories and three different traditions, and I've been told to give short answers, but I'll give as good a stab at that as ever. Look, I think we're told this is a swing state campaign, but the real issues are national. The real issues are the economy sucks. This guy's been in office for 4 years. It's time to move on. By the way, I thought Clint Eastwood... The lobbyist for YouTube told me the Clint Eastwood video was the most viewed thing on YouTube on Thursday night and all of Friday. If the election is really decided by undecided voters don't pay much attention to politics. In fact, they want to forget about politics and get on with what they think is the serious business of living. They hate politics. You can't get them to watch a political speech. They watched the Clint Eastwood thing. And what they heard was a guy who had one of the most pithy lines ever. If someone's not doing the job, no matter how much you like them, you just gotta let them go. And, you know, Ronald Reagan knew that there were swing states that would decide the 1980 election, but he campaigned nationally. I mean, sure, he had micro-targeting of the day, that's what his consultants are for, but he focused on speaking to all of us as Americans. And he had one of the best lines ever in American politics. He said, a recession is when your neighbor loses his or her job. A depression is when you lose your job, and recovery is when Jimmy Carter loses his job.
Wants to prevent the SEIU from stealing the election for Obama, since they're in charge of counting the ballots.
Oh yes, okay. Okay, this is not quite like the Spanish George Soros voting machine scandal. This is somewhat different. It is true that members of the election bureaucracy in Los Angeles County and various other counties are members of the SEIU. It's not easy to steal an election if you're just a line worker processing ballots. First of all, you basically have to have a recount. I do think there were some problems in the Cooley and Kamala Harris recount for Attorney General in 2010. That was a recount. And there were some problems in handling of the ballots. I don't think they were enough to swing the election. If this election isn't close, I don't think the SEIU is going to have its role. I worry far more about the 10,000 lawyers that Barack Obama has recruited to watch this election, so that you no longer have to win with a margin of victory, you have to win with a margin beyond litigation. By the way, the scariest thing about this election, and I'll just anticipate this question, Barack Obama's first job in politics was as the organizer for a voter registration effort called Project Vote in Illinois. Project Vote was the voter registration arm of Acorn. Has anyone here not heard of Acorn? I don't know, they seem very innocent to me. All they wanted to do was help people set up prostitution rings for underage to sell something to a teenage girl. Acorn liked Obama's role in Project Vote so much, they made him their top trainer in Chicago. This is all documented. They liked his job as trainer so much, they made him their top lawyer for all their voting rights cases. Barack Obama is the candidate from Acorn. He went to great lengths to conceal his role with Acorn in 2008. It has since come out. The President of the United States is marinated in Acorn. Now, he of course is president. He's above the fray. But do you think he has friends? Do you think he has allies? Do you think he has minions? Do you think he has henchmen who know what to do if the election is close? That is why the Election Integrity Project, TrueTheVote.org, and all of those groups that are out there trying to protect you from being disenfranchised this November are so important. I believe in a free and fair election, you will be pleased with the outcome. I believe if you do nothing and you don't pay vigilance and attention to the way the ballots are counted, you will get what you deserve, which is to be snookered and hoodwinked again.
Assuming that Prop 30 and 38 both lose, what will happen in California moving forward?
Well,
It'll be euphoria, won't it?
you know, this expression forward. First of all, I knew I was not going to be on MSNBC very much when suddenly they adopted as their slogan, lean forward. Somehow my invitations to MSNBC started drying up. Actually, one of the producers there was very kind. I said, why am I not debating your crazy liberals anymore? And the producer was very kind. He said, well, why does baloney reject the grinder? But seriously, Ronald Reagan's wisdom was so great because he really spoke from the heart to the essence of what it is to be an American. In his 1964 broadcast, A Time for Choosing, how many of you have seen it? This is the broadcast for Barry Goldwater that launched Ronald Reagan's career. There is a paragraph in that speech which gives me chills to this day, and here's what it is. We are constantly told by the elites and the pundits that we have to make a false choice in politics between left and right. I submit to you that is wrong. The real choice in politics is not right versus left. I believe the political spectrum does not run horizontally, it runs vertically. It's not right versus left, it's up versus down. Up to the maximum degree of freedom consistent with order, or down to the ante of totalitarianism. That is the choice we must present to the American people. Not right versus left, up or down. So, when I hear people say forward, into what? If you lean forward far enough, you fall into the mud.
Why is there so little punishment for those caught voting fraudulently? None, for that matter.
Because we as a society have to say, we spend millions and millions of dollars making sure our currency is protected from counterfeit bills. The job of the Secret Service is not really protecting the president. They spend a lot more resources on protecting our currency. We need to protect the currency of democracy, our votes. Prosecutors hate voter fraud cases because, look, prosecutors run for office. If you run for office and you prosecute a voter fraud case, it's either going to be a Republican or a Democrat. And believe me, there are Republican vote fraudsters out there. It's just that Republicans have so few opportunities to ever commit fraud because the machines are all run by the Democrats. If you prosecute someone, you're going to get half the political community really mad at you because you're exposing them as cheaters. So they hate these cases. They don't want to bring them. Minnesota. Everyone thought the Al Franken election smelled funny. Like a 3-day-old dead fish. But nobody paid attention. Oh, he got sworn in 312 votes. Oh well, lawyers argued. Well, here's what happened. Al Franken changed history. That 312 vote margin in Minnesota in 2008 gave the Democrats the 60th senator to pass Obamacare. That broke the filibuster against Obamacare. We would not have Obamacare in its current form if Al Franken hadn't been in the Senate. After he was sworn in, a group called Minnesota Majority, a watchdog group very similar to the Election Integrity Project, they did exhaustive work and they came up with the documented, incontrovertible fact that 1,100 felons voted illegally in the Minnesota Senate race. Now, we can't be sure how they voted because it's a secret ballot, but we have something that is called in crime fiction called clues. Fox News went out and interviewed a bunch of these people, and 9 out of 10 said, Al Franken. We don't know exactly how any individual felon votes, but we do know in states where they register by party, there seems to be one party that seems to attract about 75% of them, and that party is? Democrats. So, these are clues. Academic studies show that Bill Clinton won 91% of the felon vote in 1996. They detected a kindred spirit. He's good. He gets away with everything. So, they brought all of this information to the prosecutors, and they fought them. I debated the district attorney of Minneapolis yesterday, in Minneapolis, because they're voting on voter ID in the fall. He couldn't care less about voter fraud. He kept saying, oh, we threw away most of these cases. But they had to convict some of them, and here's why. They couldn't pursue any of the ones, or they wouldn't pursue any of the ones who said, I'm a felon, I made a mistake, I forgot I didn't have the right to vote, because you have to prove intent to commit a crime. So they didn't pursue anyone who said, I just made a mistake. You had to be stupid enough to be a felon who said, yeah, I'm a felon, and I voted, and I knew it was wrong, and what's it to you, copper? Well, look, felons are dumb, that's why they got caught, right? 191 felons have been convicted of voting illegally in that election. 66 more in the pipeline. Dozens more are being investigated. We may end up with more people convicted illegally of voting in that Franken election than Al Franken's victory margin. But there is no voter fraud. Now, here's the piece de resistance. The typical punishment, a $50 fine. $50? That's what you pay people to vote illegally. This is, at worst, it's a break-even proposition. So the answer is, we need to tell our prosecutors, especially when they run for office, yeah, we want you to go after the bank robbers. Yes, we want you to go after the sex crime offenders. We want you to go after the people who are destroying the currency of democracy, our votes too. And they'll pay attention. I've exhausted the pile?
Au contraire.
Oh.
Can you update us on the Nina Calderon versus Franklin race regarding fraud?
I'm sorry, the what?
Nina Calderon. I guess Al Franken is running for re-election this year?
No. No. I'm sorry, I don't get the question.
Will Romney bring up, I know the answer to this, will Romney bring up Obama's questionable past, Frank Marshall, David Steele, George Soros? Show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. Do you think he's going to bring up these issues in the election?
How many people here think he should bring up those issues? Okay, you are strategically correct and tactically wrong. And here's why. The time to do this was in 2008. Now, there were many reasons why this wasn't done, but, you know, there is a river of history, and it only flows in one direction. It's hard to take a river backwards. Now, I do bring up Acorn, which is the past, because I do think it has direct relevance to the 2012 election. But there's a lot of things about Barack Obama where the waters have been, shall we say, purposefully muddied. Just remember one thing. The 2008 election was the most bizarre we've ever had in American history, because the two Democratic candidates for president in the primaries were Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. They were like soul sisters. They had both studied Solowinski. Hillary Clinton's thesis at Wellesley was on the Alinsky movement. She compared it to Thomas Jefferson and Martin Luther King. She was offered a job by Solowinski himself. She only turned it down because she wanted to work for the only law firm in the San Francisco Bay Area where a majority of the partners were members of the Communist Party. So she thought Alinsky was too soft. So she was running against Barack Obama, who told the Washington Post in 2007, the finest education I ever got was at the feet of Solowinski's acolytes and descendants. So the Democratic Party was run by two Alinskyites, competing like Hitler versus Stalin in World War II. Thank goodness there are no reporters here. I meant that as a metaphor for anyone. But seriously, Saul Alinsky is a direct influence on Barack Obama. We know that. But Hillary Clinton, of course, what is the tactic of Alinskyites? The ends justify the means? The big lie, you say everything? Hillary Clinton invented the birther movement. It all came from her. Phil Berg, the inventor of the birther controversy, is a Democratic hack lawyer in Pennsylvania allied with Hillary Clinton who filed the first lawsuit on the birther controversy. Do not take the bait put out by your enemies. Frank Marshall Davis is legitimate. The book that Paul Kanger has written is very persuasive, but it didn't come out in 2008. The mainstream media didn't do its job. I admit that.
They don't do it at all. They never do it. Unless it's a Republican.
Well, there may be a few surprises coming your way. Anyway, I just said I'm not going to tell you. So, look, journalists have such a disreputable reputation. The one thing we have left is if a source tells us something, we promise not to tell it. We have to keep that promise because otherwise no sources will tell us again. So if I told you I'd make a promise to a source, and then the last bit of integrity you think of me as a journalist would be gone. But seriously, I think you have to address Barack Obama's record in office because that is what is of immediate concern to the average person trying to earn a paycheck to put their kids through school. It is possible that you will get people to spend 3 minutes a day, if you really try, worrying about Barack Obama's friends when he was a teenager or a young man. It is much more easily possible to get them to spend 3 minutes worrying about, am I going to keep my job, and where in the world am I going to get the money to pay send my kids to college? I'd pick Plan B, not Plan A, because you only have so many resources. How many people agree with me? Well, clearly I've not been very persuasive. Yes?
Several journalists like Mark Halperin, Christian Powers, and the ombudsman of the New York Times have recently acknowledged mainstream media's support for Obama. Halperin said that the media basically does whatever Obama wants. Do you think Romney will get a fair shake from the media?
You know, in debating school, there's a phrase for that. I think it's called a leading question. I think the questioner's already answered his own question. But look, let's be clear. I know people love to rail against the media, but the only reason you hear so much criticism about the media today is you created your own media. In 1980, Ronald Reagan won an election in 44 out of 50 states, and the only major outlets of news in this country, because CNN didn't even exist, really, C-SPAN had just started, were NBC, CBS, ABC, and the New York Times, and that was it. And he still won 44 states. What Ronald Reagan told people who complained about the mainstream media was, don't curse the darkness, light a candle. You have created an entire alternative media structure. In 1980, there were 40 talk radio stations. There are now 1,400. And the ratio of conservative liberal hosts is 9 to 1. 9 to 1. Can you name me a single prominent national liberal talk show host? Prominent? Prominent? The fact that there's so much dissension shows you they haven't gone very far. The internet is primarily a conservative transmission belt for new information that is not covered in the old media. Of course it's used by both sides, but I submit to you the really powerful bloggers that drive the conversation are on the right. You go through documentaries. The second biggest selling documentary in American history is now Obama 2016. It just passed Al Gore as an inconvenient truth. And there are 56 days left till the next election, and it's still airing in theater after theater. So the answer is, MacArthur did not fight every Japanese island on the way to Japan in World War II. He went island hopping. He outflanked them. We have outflanked the media. And by the way, you notice I've spent the last minute or so describing the alternative media structure, and I haven't even mentioned Fox News? That's been a small victory, I think. You are winning. The reason they're more biased than ever is because they're losing. People who are desperate become more biased, and they become more obvious, and they create more people who reject them. Their very desperate, obvious attempt to tilt towards Obama will ultimately hurt them, because people aren't stupid. Yes, they can detect subtle bias, but it's not even subtle anymore. It is to your benefit it's not subtle anymore. If it's out in the open, we can win that contest. It's when it's hidden and concealed that we have a problem.
Do you think Romney will be more aggressive than McCain in the debates? Let's hope so.
He certainly was.
I'm speechless. I just do not know what to say.
That's it.
Thank you. I will be here even at 5 o'clock. I'll be happy to chat with you. Thank you so much for coming. And I mean it. California's comeback is the day you